All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us at our roundtable discussion. It's rounding out our first day of our Wilmington Biz Conference and Expo. Today, I am with the leaders of the three area school systems, and those are the superintendents of New Hanover, Brunswick, and Pender counties. And we're fortunate that they were able to make time in their schedule that all of them could come and visit us to discuss the school's reopening plans and how those are going, as well as how remote and virtual learning has been happening so far in these recent months. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Appreciate having you all here. And just by way of introductions, so we can kind of get a lay of the land, I'm sure some people might not be as familiar with outside of their own school system and the bubble that they're trying to navigate. So I thought a good way to start us off would be to have each superintendent introduce themselves, but also really briefly explain where their school system is at right now in terms of the reopening plans. Dr. Foust, if you want to start us off.
Sure. So I'm Charles Foust. I am the superintendent for New Hanover County Schools. I started here on September 1st, and our school district is we're currently in Plan C, and we'll be moving to Plan B on October 12th.
All right, and Dr. Oates, and who, by the way, I should point out, is actually joining us while on the road, so he may have to pop in and out while we're on this call. But thank you for doing that as well.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Oates. I'm the superintendent of Brunswick County Schools. And I'd first like to say it and welcome Dr. Foust to the region.
Thank you,
sir. Reached out through email, but I wanted to make sure we welcome him. Glad to have you here with us in the Southeast region. And also, I've learned that he is my fraternity brother. Good thing as well. Alpha Phi Alpha. We in Brunswick County, we are currently in Plan B. We are doing a hybrid model, A-B day schedule, where we have two cohorts of our students. Cohort A coming on Mondays and Tuesdays, Cohort B coming on Thursdays and Friday, and Wednesdays are a remote learning day for everyone. We're soon to start for our K-5 students, a full week, 5-day, full-time face-to-face instruction starting on October 5th per the governor's announcement a couple of weeks ago. So that's where we are. We have not yet decided as to when, of course, we will be able to move our 6 through 12 students into another phase. And of course, that will be waiting until the governor's next announcement, we hope. But we are looking forward to having our elementary students come back face-to-face on October 5th.
And Dr. Hill, can you fill us in on where Pender County stands right now?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Stephen Hill, Pender County Superintendent. Basically, we were all supposed to start on an A, B, or C, and now we're running 2 consecutive plans of B and C. Consequently, with the same resources that we were given at the beginning of the year. So that's where we're at right now, and we haven't met as a board this month yet. So we're currently looking at data or anything new.
Okay, so now that everyone has that straight, we've got A, B, C plans, AA, BB plans, synchronous, asynchronous learning. So now we're all caught up to speed. So obviously we're going to jump into the details about some of this and how it unfolds. But I just want to remind our attendees and those who are watching, if you're joining on later, you want to share this later, we'll have this on our Business Journal YouTube website and put the link out for that. But we wanted to give early access to those of you who are joining us for our conference this week. And if you do have questions, feel free to put it in the Brella platform chat or the Zoom chat, and our team will keep an eye on it, and we will call you over if you want to ask any of the superintendents your questions directly. So just to start us off, one thing I was curious about is ultimately these decisions are made by the county school boards, and I know there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. You guys are hearing an awful lot from parents and from staff members, but I wanted to talk to you guys as leaders also. While the decision rests with the school board, you guys also make individual recommendations based on what you're seeing with the health data, what you're seeing with the school plan. So I'm kind of curious, and feel free to make this, as a discussion point amongst the three of you, but how did you come up with your individual most recent recommendations that you presented to your school boards about whether to reopen in class or not?
Well, I'll take that first, being that we were the ones that are going back to face-to-face learning for K-5. As you mentioned, we stay in constant contact with our health officials here in Brunswick County, and we communicate pretty much daily, looking at the metrics on infection spread, the number of the rate of infection, those types of things that are happening within Brunswick County. And in speaking with our health director, we saw that we have substantially decreased in the number of positive cases, particularly since where we were earlier this summer. So that was definitely encouraging. And also by being able to put in place the protocols that was required by the North Carolina Public Toolkit for making sure that we had safety protocols in place. Combining that with our numbers, we felt that we would be able to bring our K-5 students back in a safe manner. Now, of course, the 6 feet social distancing was not included in the governor's announcement. However, we are taking as many protocols and precautions as we can to ensure the safety of students within classrooms. Masks are still required, hand washing, sanitizing the desks, washing hands, using hand sanitizer, staying as far as apart as we can in classrooms is something that we will make part of our regular day. So with that said, we are looking forward to have our students back, and we pretty much feel that they will be in a safe environment in which they can learn.
Vicki, I concur with Dr. Oates. We do meet every day with our health department. And if you go to look at the Code of Ethics for Educators in the state of North Carolina, the very first bullet is protect the health and safety of students. And so that's an obvious start for all of us, I believe. We do meet with them every morning at 9 a.m. to cover all cases. We've actually developed a shared database where our input goes in, their response comes in, and it updates on the dashboard every 5 minutes. So what we're doing is looking at that carefully. Now, what the governor has done is given each county the ability to make that decision based on their numbers. We're actually understanding the most recent meeting with our school health department, our numbers are actually reversing and we're actually spiking in Pender County at the moment. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at, but that was the major factor that we looked at in making our return decisions. The other one would be, we do a series of family surveys, and we also do a series of staff surveys to make sure that we have input from all our partners and all our stakeholders.
And likewise, over on our side, we are continuously having conversations with the health officials. And that's the biggest part of most of our conversations is talking with health officials. And so we have a committee that actually meets with them on a regular basis. And then, of course, we bring it and, of course, brought that to the board. And that's how we came with our decision. Actually, our board had, when they went to C, it was only for a limited amount of time. So we were to bring a recommendation to our board. So that's when we brought the recommendation for B to the board. And in concert with meeting with the health directors. And so we decided, instead of going 1 week in and then 2 weeks out, we decided to look at a model of an AABB schedule, with Wednesdays being a remote learning. And that way we were getting more instruction with our students and more FaceTime with them. Now, there will still be opportunities for individuals who want to remain in Plan C. And so they're still able to do that. And so we will, of course, be running 2 models. We'll have the B model and the C model for those that are there.
Dr. Fausto, can you talk a little bit about how that decision-making happened so quickly? So you mentioned there was a decision to move, once you were going to move to in-class learning, and that would be students, elementary students, in the classrooms for 1 week and out 2 weeks. But then not too long after that, it switched the scheduling to students that are doing in-classroom learning, not those who choose to remain remote, but those that are wanting to go to school would go every week, but just 2 days of the week. And I throw that out there because I know that's one thing that a lot of families have asked about in terms of trying to plan work scheduling and logistics around that. So one question I have is, why that switch so suddenly, but also, I guess, to broaden it up to all of you after Dr. Foust talks is, you know, as we come into the winter season, how likely is it that you see the schedules possibly changing, going back and forth? You know, should people take the schedule that we have coming up now and expect that to last throughout the rest of the semester?
So we were always looking at different models. And so when I got here, that was one of the models. The first one was the 1 weekend, 2 weeks out was the model that we had considered. There was nothing that was official that was being done. So when we sat down at the table and we wanted to look at different instructional patterns and what it actually took, and are we actually doing our best by giving the instruction? And bottom line, one, we want to talk about safety and making sure that everyone is safe. And that's the first gist. So can we provide a safe environment for all students and all employees? And so we checked that off, and yes, that was after talking with our county health officials. Then we looked at, okay, what's the instructional model? We know that 1 weekend, and then students are then 2 weeks out of school and it's in a remote learning. What is that going to look like for the instructional practices? So we sat down back at the table and we said, okay, we think we can offer, as I stated, instead of having 3 groups, we can go to 2 groups. And what would 2 groups look like? And so what it's going to currently look like is a project-based flipped classroom model. And I use that loosely because it's our terminology of a flipped classroom, but with a more emphasis on a flipped classroom. With the emphasis on some project-based learning, because everyone hasn't. This is a new way of teaching for everyone, and we are all school districts across the state, across the country are in the same boat trying to figure it out and what's going to be best. And so I don't believe anyone has the magic potion of this is what's going to happen and this is how it will happen. I do believe there will be some kinks in the AABB schedule. There were kinks in the 1 week on, the 2 weeks off. There are kinks in the remote learning. So we know what we're doing is what is it going to be, what will the instruction look like? And so that's where we had to start. And when we were able to do that, we were getting more face time with students versus the times that we were given with the 1 week in and the 2 weeks out. And so that's where we came to it and how we switched from the 1 week in and 2 weeks out. And then our board did ask us to look at it, to give them a different model than just the 1 week in, 2 weeks out.
Dr. Oates, looking forward towards the winter months and cold season, flu season, especially with Brunswick County schools going back to full instruction. Are you setting out the expectation that might change depending on how cases go, or are you guys trying to just logistically plan for a full 9 weeks of that?
Well, what we're looking at is pretty much what Dr. Foust said. We're staying in constant contact with our health officials. And if our health officials give us information that will allow us, that makes us have to reevaluate some things, I think that we will be able to do that. One of the goals of all of these plans, A, B, and C, if you remember, was to be able to move fluidly through each one if the need arose for that. And with now the governor giving local boards the authority to make those decisions, particularly with moving students back K-5 full time, it can only be assumed that the boards will have the authority then, if need be, to move the plans back if cases begin to rise and we have more infections within the schools, or even to Plan C. And as my colleagues have as well, we still maintain our remote learning option for those who completely want to stay on remote. That is going until the end of the first semester for those who wish to do that. But we've also given folks the opportunity to make some changes. When we announced that we were going to go to K-5 coming back full time, we allowed those who signed up early for remote learning totally to go back and reevaluate their own situations and make a decision as to whether or not they wanted to come back face to face. And right now, I think the last count, the sign up closed yesterday, and we were at 413 students ended up moving from virtual learning, remote learning, back to face in grades K-5. So we were allowing folks to kind of move through these plans, and if the need arises, I can only assume that we will be able to move back if need be.
And Dr. Hill, your district has had the most experience locally in terms of having students in classrooms. What can you share in terms of the lessons that y'all learned in Pender with logistics, or just how that works out, particularly if there's lessons or logistics that would be helpful for New Hanover and Brunswick as they start entering this phase?
Well, I can't keep harping on enough the communications piece. Keep the communication going with your health department. There has to be, a constant daily, if not more of that conversation with them about cases and what's happening. As here, I mean, we're somewhere between 65, 75,000 people in this community, but we have 10,200 students roughly. So almost every household is touched by the school system. So you have to keep those numbers and those cases actively talking and understanding what's going on with the quarantines, because in many cases there's public events and things like that bring that into the school. So you have to remain constantly vigilant about what's happening in your community and constant contact with the health department and make sure that you're aware of what's happening. Currently, we've been very active with that and doing very well. We have no clusters identified at this time. In other words, that we're spreading it. It's all been coming into the school. We've been identifying and immediately quarantining those people or isolating those people. I think the other piece of that is communications with your staff. Like I think Dr. Oates has referenced, and maybe Dr. Foust, is that basically sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and every day is going to be a different story. We've never taught like this before in history, and every day is an evaluation. You don't know what staff's going to be available based on what I just said. If you have to quarantine staff members, then it's all hands on deck. We have sent central office staff out to cover schools and sub classrooms just to keep the school open. So those are the big pieces: is communication, and then try to overcome, all those obstacles working as a team. And that's really where we've been at. There's lots of different little individual things, but we can talk about those as you want to in detail.
Let me ask along that lines of communications. How often do either the three of you talk or plan to talk, or do the three school systems talk, particularly when it comes to these types of logistics questions, best practices? Everyone's, is trying to figure out this new way. Is that happening in any kind of collaborative way together?
We have an alliance, with the Southeast Alliance, where we've actually put together a task force and sent committee members that have worked together to try to come up with the best plans possible. And of course, we always communicate. Jerry and I kind of text back and forth about what's coming up, what are we feeling. But I hope Dr. Foust, I've sent him an email, welcome email. So we're starting to touch base a little bit. So, but basically we do have an association regionally, and we have breakout groups that focus on specific planning. Guys, you want to add something to that?
I mean, in addition to the region, of course, Steve, and this summer when we were in the thick of it, we were having weekly meetings with superintendents across the state. So not only were we able to get information from the region, we were able to see how other superintendents and other school boards were dealing with things across the state and getting a different perspective. The document just came out that went to superintendents just the other day, some of the lessons learned. And in going through that, you get to see some of the things that you knew and some of the things that became aha moments for you as well, that we were able to share with our cabinet and other folks within our system in order to make things better. But the informal conversations that we have in our region are frequent. It's nothing for us to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you guys doing over there? And we just share that information back and forth so that we can see if those things will fit the needs that we have for our respective districts.
So when you talk about lessons learned, and you don't have to throw anyone under the bus if you don't want to, what you see in other school systems or even other parts of the country, what is it that you guys hope to avoid locally, just in how either remote or in schools being handled?
Well, I think one of the things I'd say is kind of what Steve was saying, the emphasis on communication. If, you know, I've seen some situations where there wasn't enough communication with the public, giving where we are. One of the things that we've done as well, as far as the dashboard, since we're getting ready to have our students come back face to face, we wanted to make sure our community knew that if there were any cases that took place that were in the school, whether it was a student or employee, they would have the data on that. Of course, it wouldn't be specifically who the person is, but for example, if one of our high schools, like for instance, North Brunswick had 3 students, we have a dashboard set up now that we've gotten information from the health department, and it's on our website, and parents and anyone in the community can simply click on that link and it'll show all of our schools and whether or not we have any students or employees that have tested positive for COVID. That way, I think it ends a lot of speculation and rumor and fear. That way folks will know, and they can make decisions if they choose to. We also, not only just the positive cases, but we also have on that dashboard anyone that has chosen to quarantine. So I think by communicating and making sure that accurate information is out on our website, on our social media pages, I think that helps. So those are some of the lessons learned in observing some of the things that took place in districts across the state from that document that came out.
And I echo exactly that. Those are some of the things that, you know, some of my other colleagues have also stated. And then just one of the things of, you know, you can never over communicate, and making sure that you present individuals with facts. And that's what the lessons learned that I've, you know, just in reading other documents and speaking with colleagues throughout the state is literally making sure that you keep accurate reports in your dashboard so that individuals can look at it and, you know, definitely don't hide anything. There's nothing to hide. If it happens, it happens. And then let everyone know that there is a game plan of, you know, how to monitor, how to clean, what the expectations are. If you have to quarantine, what's the process for quarantine, those types of things. And if you have to move back, how does that work? Those are types of things that I've spoken with others, and those are their lessons learned.
I guess continuing along this line of different issues surrounding communication or different ways that you have to tackle it now. I'm curious about, so I see social media. I see the avalanche of comments and feedback that the school systems are getting on different sides. And it's because, you know, this is a very emotional issue. You have a lot of emotion surrounding COVID itself, but then also now we're talking about education and we're talking about children and families' schedules. And then you also add in safety and precautions of teachers and staff that, you know, have to work in the environments as well. So I guess my question is, and Dr. Foust, maybe you could field this first since you had a virtual town hall last night, you know, and I know this, it's a very broad amount of feedback that you guys are getting, but what are some of the issues that you're hearing the most feedback or comments or questions on? Like, is there something that you are continually hearing over and over from families and staff?
So I will be honest, the feedback is on 2 separate ends. So we have those who are saying we need to stay in plan C, and then we have those who are like, let's go to plan A. And then there's those that will say, thank you for going to plan B. So there's not I can't say that, you know, 90% of our parents are saying, let's stay in plan C, and 90% aren't there. It's all across the table. The number one thing is safety and cleaning, and making sure that students have the PPEs and masks. What are the requirements for wearing the mask? Those are the big take homes. And then some of it is the remote learning of how will the instruction take place? Will it be asynchronous and synchronous learning? Those are some of I think the themes that rise up, but I could not necessarily say that there is one group that's saying that they want Plan A versus Plan C overriding. I just don't.
What kind of questions do you get, Dr. Hill?
It's very similar to what Dr. Foust was saying. I mean, we've got them from both ends of the spectrum and Plan B. We've got people who are satisfied. We've run some recent surveys and basically, somewhere around 86% are saying we're just, whatever you do, we're going to stay with what we're doing. So we really have about what Dr. Foust was saying. We have people at each end of the decision, and we also have people sitting right in the middle who are kind of going, I'm happy with B. So very similar metrics from the Hanover.
And then Dr. Oates, for feedback side for you, I'm curious because you guys are about to switch to Plan A and in-school classroom for the elementary kids. What is the feedback or questions that you're hearing from teachers and staff?
It's, again, even coming from teachers and staff as compared to students and parents, it's all over the board. You have many staff members who are just elated to be able to have those elementary kids come back. As I visit schools and talk to teachers and talk to staff, you'll have a lot of them who say, I'm ready to have these kids full-time back in my classroom. When can we do it? And then you'll have others who are a little reluctant because they have some fears about having those numbers in the classroom without being able to adequately socially distance. And I understand both sides of the equation. I both understand their concerns. But going back to Dr. Foust's statement about safety and ensuring that the buildings are cleaned effectively and putting those protocols that we worked so hard to have in place, I think, like as I've said from the outset, I think we should be okay. And if we need to move back, we would. But as far as the parents and students, again, it's all over the place. You have folks who are currently in remote learning who think it's the greatest thing we could have ever done. Their children are loving it. And then there are some that I met with just yesterday. I was at a school yesterday morning and had the opportunity to talk to two parents who were sitting there waiting as their child went in to speak with a counselor because their child is having a very difficult time with it. And they were definitely against remote learning, but they were in a precarious situation because one of the parents has a life-threatening illness. And while they want their child to come back to school, they understood that if he were to contract something and bring it home, that puts them in a bad situation. So in some cases, it's just not a win-win situation for anyone. So we have to make the best decisions we have with the information that we can be afforded.
Has anyone had staffing issues in terms of having either enough teachers to cover the students or maybe students have left school so you've had to reassign teachers? I guess, Dr. Hill, you can start us off on that since you've had experience of having teachers in the classroom. So any issues either already being seen with teacher staffing levels or that you are preparing for because you have concerns that might happen when the models change?
Yeah, staffing is a major concern. Basically, you don't know what's going to happen day to day. If there's a quarantine situation where you have a student that participated in something off campus comes on, maybe the family, the siblings, all those people who are within a certain time frame or distance are required to quarantine. Well, you have enough of that, then you don't have enough staff to actually open school. We have had to have two schools that have gone down for a short period of time or so till we can bring them back up. We do some deep cleaning or sanitizing and things like that. So staffing is a major concern. The other piece of that too is we haven't been waived or given any leadway as far as accountability and mandates. So all your K-3 classes this year are still only can be 18 kids, so basically the idea is K-3, if you start moving kids around, all those are kind of peel that layer of onion back, and understand all the different mandates. That's a state mandate. So we're not exempt from that this year. We're also not exempt from any of the accountability measures at the end of the year. So all that has to play in when we start making these decisions with how do we get the right staff members in the right place. And like Dr. Oates was stating, we've got staff members that have some life-threatening illnesses that we have figured out how to allow them to teach without being, directly in contact or causing harm. Now those situations will have to be looked at as well. And like you said, it's always a constant moving target as far as there is no right answer. That's always the best of the worst situation.
How does that work in Pender, Dr. Hill? If there is a positive case of a student or a teacher, does that classroom quarantine or essentially shut down for a couple of weeks, or how does that work?
You've got 3 doctors here, and I've got several on staff, and none of us have a medical degree. So basically what we do is refer all of that to the health department, and we follow their directions.
Okay, and Dr. Oates, also on staffing, I heard you say on the Brunswick County School Board meeting where they made the vote to change to Plan A. You had a comment I thought was kind of interesting, but you were talking about the students that have moved into private and charter schools and whether you expect those students to return back to the public school system once it reopens. So from all of you, I'm curious if your school systems have seen that. Have you seen an exodus of students out of public into private and charter since the school year started?
Well, what I can say, I can't tell you exactly where they went. I can tell you that we did see a number drop. It wasn't as drastic as we thought it would be. I'm thinking to the tune of around 300, 400 students. We actually had anticipated many more than that. But in speaking with some of the principals, particularly our elementary principals, they have been in contact with some parents who had left. And once we made the announcement that we were going to go back to K-5 coming back in full time, the phones were ringing off the hook, emails were being sent to the principals letting them know that they did intend to come back to the public school system. So that was definitely encouraging. But I kind of want to get back to what you said. We were talking about staffing earlier. Staffing is difficult in a normal situation. COVID simply exacerbated what we deal with every year. So not only we're looking at teaching staff, think about the substitute pool that has been pretty much decimated by the advent of COVID. So you're looking at if a teacher were to just need to be out, not even COVID related, the pool from which we pull our substitutes has now become very shallow because folks are reluctant to come in. And in Brunswick counties particularly, most of our substitutes are well in age. So that plays a part in their decision-making as to whether they want to go into the school system where COVID may be lurking and be asymptomatic. So it's a difficult time for schools, particularly when we look at trying to make sure we have adequate staff to serve our students.
Dr. Foust, along those lines of staffing, as you guys prepare for having kind of a hybrid system set up of in-school remote and students doing both of those throughout the week, how do teachers balance handling both in-school and remote students at the same time? Time-wise, is it going to, does the math work out there in that equation for them?
Oh, it does. We are training teachers. I think it was yesterday and today and this week, principals are going to be training them on how to implement what we call our flipped classroom. So they're going to gain a better knowledge of how to do it here. But I did want to talk about the issue of the, you know, not the reassigning teachers, but the students. If one of the things that we have to think about, and I'm pretty sure all of us, we won't know how many students we're going to have until the actual students come to school. So the planning for that, it's almost like a mystery. Or solving for the unknown for us math teachers, because we don't know how many are actually going to stay in remote versus who are going to send their children. So when we look at how many substitutes will we need and is it going to impact, and a lot of the individuals are talking about, and I'll say some teachers like social distancing, or parents are social distancing. And because we went from 3 groups to 2 groups, but we still have that unknown variable out there of how many were actually going to stay in the remote learning. So we're also having to accommodate that. And so then we look at the third of those who are going to be there on that AA week and that BB week. So what we do know is that our teachers know the subject matter. That's what we do know. And that's what we are reaffirming with them. You know your subject matter, you know your content. All we're doing now is how is that going to look when it comes to asynchronous and asynchronous learning, and then face-to-face. And so there will be, you know, and I share with them, when we first start, it will probably be rough until we can figure it out. And so that's where I want people to get to the point that we know this is going to be a challenge. However, we don't expect individuals to master it day one because they've never done it before. We will have those who are a little more tech savvy with it. And we have some principals who have really, really come up with a unique way of implementing it in their buildings. And so we've set the foundation of this is what it has to be. Now your personality has to come out through it. So I would say it depends, to answer your question about how they're going to be teaching the synchronous, asynchronous learning and with face-to-face. It will depend. It'll honestly depend on the teacher and the implementation. But the goal is not to make it more difficult and for teachers to teach. That is not the goal.
Okay, I know we're talking a lot about in person and how that's going to go and all the issues surrounding that. But I also, before we run out of time, want to talk about remote learning and the issues surrounding that. You know, the in-person part is what is the newest component to us, the newest change, what we're trying to wrap our heads around. But remote learning has been in place now in some level since the spring a little bit, obviously, since the shutdown started, and now about 9 weeks for most students. So has remote learning gone how you all hoped it would or expected to, or what have been some of the sticking points on that?
Well, I'd say that coming from March 15th or March 16th, whenever it was we shut down, at that point, remote learning, we were walking in the dark. It was a place we'd never been before. We had to do a turnaround on a weekend and provide instruction for students. Teachers weren't ready for it. We weren't ready for it. Boards of education weren't ready for it. Definitely parents were not ready for it. I think what we have learned from that time has enabled us to make remote learning better. There were some expectations put in place for students, for staff, for teachers, as it pertains to remote learning that were not there in the spring. And again, we were kind of walking in the dark and didn't know, as Dr. Hill said, we didn't know what we didn't know. And but now we can say with certainty it's better. Is it perfect? No. Is it perfect for everyone? Not at all. You will have some parents, as I said earlier, who love it, and students who are doing well, and you have others who definitely don't embrace the remote learning concept. And there's something to be said with having a teacher in front of you face to face to build those relationships even more. And that's the piece that I was worried about with remote learning, making sure that those relationships that were built within the classroom could be duplicated or to some degree from a computer screen face to face. You just don't have that time. You don't have that interaction as you would in person, and I understand that. But we were doing the best that we could in March. And I think, as I said before, now things are much better. And as evidenced by the folks who have wished to remain on remote learning, something must be going well for them.
And I'll say some of the same things. It's working for some, it's not working for all. I don't believe that we've gotten to what we consider across the district at a mastery level with it. But I don't believe we're for the district from March until now, I don't believe we're at the beginner level either. We fall somewhere in between depending on the execution of technology and I believe the individuals who are more technologically savvy. But I do believe that we do have to think about all the other things that are going on with it. And, there are people who are, their anxiety levels are high. And we have parents whose anxiety levels are high. So, it may be acceptable for some. And so that's what we're doing. And, just being able to give individuals options at this point. That's what we were doing in an effort to, you know, the hope and the prayer is that this virus isn't around for, you know, the remainder of the school year. So our goal is to get back to some form of normalcy. And so to look at what would a plan A look like for all students. But at the time, we're having to, you know, provide options to make sure that this virus is under control.
Vicki, I'll just finish out. I totally agree with both Dr. Oates and Dr. Foust. There is no real substitute for face-to-face learning. I think that everybody agrees that that's the best way of learning. But in this situation, we had to take in a lot of factors that were beyond our control. And we're just trying to work our way back to offering that. And hopefully we learn some things from it so that we can enhance and add value to what we do at the end of this journey.
Real quick question. Do all 3 school systems have a form of the virtual academy platform? Like, in our families using that, or is that not been as rolled out as expected?
Yes, New Hanover does have a virtual school.
Brunswick does not have a virtual school. We just continue with the remote learning that we have right now.
Pender does have a virtual school that we've expanded.
Dr. Hill, which platform do you use in Pender for that?
Ed.D is one that we work with at the high school. The high school actually performed pretty well because this has been a norm for them. Online learning has been something we've been working through high schools, the North Carolina Virtual Public School, and Ed.D and now Apex as well. So we have 3 different platforms at the high school level. So realistically, that was the easier of the group. Our middle school struggled because it did expand too fast. It worked somewhat well in the beginning, but then over the weekend, 50 to 100,000 people, you know, this is not a North Carolina problem. This is a international problem. And so a lot of these people that we work with to offer this online learning platform are struggling as well to keep up. They can't find instructors, and we actually had to speak with the vice president of the company. They changed our platform, gave us a whole new way of connecting for our students, and now it's back up to speed. And we started adding tutoring there. But because middle schoolers were kind of caught in that middle, they weren't used to doing what the high schoolers do, and they move somewhat during the day. They're not as simply placed between 1 to 2 teachers as elementary. Elementary was easier to schedule, obviously. You spend most of your time with the same person within 2 people. Middle school became that zone that we're having to struggle with when it comes to online delivery more than others.
And Dr. Foust, what's the name of the platform New Hanover uses?
We're using Edgenuity.
Okay. Has that been highly utilized, or are most people opting for the remote lessons?
Well, it's a little both. If they're in the virtual school, however, we are using, of course, we have our normal platform, which is coming through Canvas for the LMS, but most of our staff, most of our individuals are using the virtual classrooms with the teacher, the majority.
Yeah, Pender is a Google district.
And then Dr. Foust, and I don't know if the other districts are doing this as well, but I know there was talk originally of creating a county-wide virtual school, its own standalone school, have its own principal. So not this third-party platform that we're talking about right now, but to roll that out sometime, you know, next year for an all virtual school to be created. Is that still something that's being planned, or is that those plans, have they changed?
It would still be having conversation referencing that.
Are any of the other school systems considering that, or its own standalone virtual school?
Pender, we're having discussions about that based on the high level, higher than what we originally surveyed of attendance on our virtual schools now. So that is a discussion we're having as a potential recommendation in the future.
Brunswick hasn't started that conversation as of yet.
Okay, and before we say goodbye, I wanted to leave us, I guess, on a little bit more of a positive note. I know I've been grilling all 3 of you about what our lessons learned and pitfalls are and what do we plan for worst case scenarios. But, you know, one thing, if you take a step back, I wanted to ask you about was what are, as difficult as everything is and the logistics are, what are some good things that you have seen come out of this dismantling and rebuilding of the education system Obviously, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of downsides, but have there been things that have come up that you think will ultimately strengthen how we run our education system in the area, like long term?
I can say for Brunswick County, what has been evident for us is, and it kind of just reinforces what we knew to begin with, and that was the compassion and the dedication that our teachers have to provide quality education for their students. Even in the midst of COVID, their dedication has not wavered. The difficulty of providing remote learning and then planning for face-to-face as well is difficult at best. But our teachers have worked tirelessly to do that. And also looking back as we prepared to implement Plan B, our operations folks, our custodians, our people in the operations department and central office have worked tirelessly to prepare our buildings, to make sure that they're safe, to put up plexiglass barriers in different places, to provide the PPE that was needed to the schools. Those things working in concert with the instructional side of the house has shown us that the dedication has not left folks in Brunswick County, and I think our students will be better for it in the end.
So for us, I mean, the first I would say is we celebrated yesterday 1 million meals being served. And so that is one of the things that we have, of course, been able to do with all of our families and continuing the summer feeding program. The others, which is unique is that, sometimes individuals, we'll say students and parents may have to go on vacation during the school year and that they are having to be out of school. With this virtual learning, we've learned a new way of teaching students. And so I think those are some things that we can take back for conversation. If someone is, not able to come to school, can they actually now use a virtual platform to look at how we're doing it? Or, teachers who are sick, can we still have the authentic instruction go on in the classroom by the teacher being, do it like a satellite and having, possibly a sub in the classroom, or someone to supervise the students while the expert is actually teaching the lesson. So those are some things I think we can take a look into and see how we can make school a little easier. But I think we've learned a lot from this. How to be patient is one thing.
And Vicki and Pender, I'll just pick up on what Dr. Foust said. Yeah, this has expedited our research as far as how we can serve people. You think hurricane here, you think ice, you think things like that. Maybe we don't have to shut down anymore. I mean, we've been talking about that, discussing that, but this push for the whole state has actually kind of moved that direction much more quickly than I think we could have gotten there. We have been working on a one-to-one type technology plan in this county for a couple of years. This moved us to fulfill that plan more quickly, so that technology is there. We've made all our schools hotspots. They all provide Wi-Fi throughout the county now. We're starting to move that out to public and buildings. That we're working with more public-private relationships. So we're engaging with the county commissioners, with local government. We're looking, I think it's going to mean a difference in infrastructure. It's going to finally push that conversation at the public-private level to see how important it is to get that infrastructure built, not only in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas, and what it will be, the benefit of that for society as a whole. Additionally, I mentioned hurricanes. Our group came through Florence together, and that's what we all reference back to. Is we survived Florence, and we've reached down and deep in our soul, and we basically have pulled that same strength back, that Pender strong strength. And these people working together, it's unreal what you see them going through and what they're doing to provide a good education for these children. And I just cannot say enough about our teaching staff and our administrators and our board in this county.
All right, well, I want to thank all three of you. I know you personally and your teams are all extremely busy right now trying to navigate these changes and changes that are coming up. So I appreciate you guys taking an hour out of your day to come share some more information and these updates. Again, if you are joining on late, we'll post this on the Business Journal's YouTube page after it becomes live. And this is the last roundtable for the day, but be sure if you're still on the conference app, you can check out the exhibitors area and set up meeting with other attendees. And don't forget tomorrow morning, our keynote address, which will once again be streamed on Facebook and on WECT, will be with the US Senate candidate. So you can join us back here at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But for today, thank you very much, Dr. Foust, Dr. Oates, Dr. Hill. A lot of great information, and I know you have a lot of work to get back to doing, and a lot of people who are watching you closely to see how you do it. So thank you very much for the information. I'm sure we'll be checking in with you later as the school year progresses. So have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.